One Shots, a condensed version of our normal show where instead of 2 or 3 of us are talking about a movie we've recently saw, it's just one of us. As long as the intro was edited properly by myself, you know what this is. Hi, I'm Vaux. Welcome to Pick It and Flick It podcast. I haven't posted a one-shot in a very long time, and this was sort of an idea I had to counteract what Luke was doing, because I'm no Confused Reviews, so it's a little different for me to sit down being the only guy at a mic and reviewing a movie. But at his request, I did another one, and he jokingly made well, maybe not so much of a joke, but he made a thumbnail for this video that didn't exist until now, of me reviewing one of my favorite movies, which is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy from 2005. I do not typically do scripted movie reviews, so I do have like a bit of a script that I typed up, but from there we'll see what happens. I'm sure I will start rambling about things, because this is going to be way longer than the initial 10 to 15 minute one-shots I've done in the past. For those who know me personally, and if you're listening, thank you, or for anyone who has been listening to our show and documenting every single word that I have ever said, you know that I am a huge fan of Douglas Adams and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I have probably seen this movie, the 2005 adaptation, probably 10 times, if not more, over the years since it's been released, as well as I've read the books. Again, the first one being at least consumed 5 times in its entirety. Some comics. I've listened to part of the 1978 radio show, as well as the 1981 TV series that was a British comedy based upon the books. There's even a really shitty text-based computer game from 1985, and I'm currently patiently awaiting the upcoming Hulu series, which was announced in like 2019, and then due to all of the fun stuff that happened in the world, I'm sure it's been pushed back repetitively, even though it somehow has already been renewed for a second season despite the delays. I just can't wait. I can't wait to see it, hopefully soon. But I'm not here to talk about anything else besides the 2005 adaptation of this movie, so let's buckle in for one of the movies that literally changed my outlook on British comedy itself and heightened my love for strange and slapstick sci-fi movies, because, well, the movie stars a young Martin Freeman, well before his days in the Lord of the Rings prequels, The Hobbit, and also his roles in the MCU. He's playing Arthur Dent. Arthur is the main character throughout the movie, as well as the books. Freeman is accompanied by my personal favorite, Sam Rockwell, as well as New Girl herself, Zooey Deschanel, and Mos Def, Yassin Bey. And I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. It's Yassin, and then Bey. So Bey, I'm hoping, is the way that you pronounce his last name. If that cast wasn't enough to suck you in somehow, I'll throw Stephen Fry and Alan motherfucking Rickman to add the little cherry and sprinkles on top of this delicious dessert. And if you're trying to figure out a good way to excuse yourself as to why you haven't or shouldn't watch this movie, all I have to say is you're a fool, and you need to get some help. This is going to be a different one-shot where I'm going to talk more about the story itself and break it down, instead of just giving my yay, it was great because of this, or nay, it was bad because of that reasoning. This story can get a bit complicated and head-scratching at times, and I think there was a broad agreement across the board when it came to consumerism for people who are going to the movies to see this at the time, because it's a bit out there. I want to break it down for you just a little bit to give you more of an idea of what you're either going to be watching or have already watched, or B, what you are about to get yourself into, so it could be a little strange. Oh, and by the way, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen this. Arthur Dent, again, the man that I mentioned earlier, our main character, has somehow managed to become the last human in the galaxy for the first quarter of the movie and discovers that his house is going to be demolished the morning of where the movie takes place to make way for a bypass, which is basically an expressway or a highway in American culture. This event basically kicks off what is soon to be a very stressful week for poor Arthur. I think at the end he becomes quite understanding to the extent that he can with all of the exciting events that happen. Arthur is trying to delay the destruction of his house by laying down in front of some bulldozers in a construction company that is threatening to knock it over, when his buddy, Ford Prefect, who is played by Yasin Bey, or Mos Def, and he convinces him, Arthur, to go to the pub to pretty much explain what is going to happen real fast here. He dives right into the fact saying that the world is coming to an end because it's going to be destroyed, just like his house, and that he's an alien from a planet that is in the vicinity of Betelgeuse. And that's Betelgeuse, not the one that comes around if you say his name 3 times. He also explains that he is a journalist that has been working on a book called The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a universal guide that holds all the information you will ever need while you are traveling around the galaxy. And Ford tells Arthur that the Earth is scheduled to be destroyed by a race called the Vogons to make way for a hyperspace bypass, which is kind of ironic. I've seen many adaptations, as I had mentioned already, but this is by far my favorite one, and I think it's because it's more modern. However, the only other movie I've seen Yasin Bey in is The Italian Job with Mark Wahlberg. So the fact that when I see him or I see a different adaptation of Ford, I only want to see Yasin as the part. On top of that, Martin Freeman gives a really strong performance as a completely befuddled British man that just wants to have a normal day full of drinking tea and relaxing, quite literally. From there, the story just puddle jumps from one tragedy to the next. Events that pop up and happen so quickly and sporadically that I can understand why people get a little confused. Ford reveals that his ability to hitchhike is powered by a ring that he carries on his fingers, and he does so as the Vogons kind of come in and start to destroy the Earth, which lands themselves captured by the nasty aliens themselves. The movie version of the Vogons is significantly better at portraying the ones from the TV, as far as its design in the book. The director of the movie, Garth Jennings, yes, that's the guy who did Sing and Sing 2 most recently, based his concept of the Vogons on a cartoonist by the name of James Gilray. He was famous for his political comics back in the 1800s, Garth Jennings saying that his creations were so grotesque when we look at them that he realized that these were the Vogons he needed in the movie. Another fun fact about these Vogons, and I guess the movie in general for that matter, is that the Jim Henson's Creature Shop supplied all of the creature effects and characters in this movie, such as like Marvin the Paranoid Robot, of course the Vogons, the whale, which we'll get to later on, and the scintillating, jeweled, scuttling crab. And these are only seen on screen for just a moment, but it's actually the crabs that are smashed and eaten by the Vogons. Jamie Courtier, who has an astounding resume under his belt, was the project supervisor for the Creature Shop on this movie. And I could go on and on about the amazing designs in this whole, adventure for hours. And if you're interested, please go to the Muppet Wiki, which is where I found more details, and check out his resume and the things that he worked on, because it's actually quite impressive. Speaking of designs, let's talk a little bit about the sets, eh? The next portion of this crazy story is heavily based around set design, and it's not necessarily the first thing that should be coming to your mind when you're watching it, because you're obviously trying to, gobble up all of this information. But if you take a second, go back and pause and kind of look at some of the things that they're in, is what obviously I did way later on through my second, third, fourth, etc. watch throughs. It's quite amazing. The group that ends up forming is made up of Sam Rockwell's character, which comes to kind of unravel that it's Ford's semi-half-cousin by the name of Zaphod Beeblebrox, who has a bit of a crazy story himself. We'll kind of get there. As well as Zooey Deschanel's character, Trisha McMillan, but she goes by Trillian. Their home base that they kind of spend most of their time in is a spaceship that Zaphod stole by the name of Heart of Gold. The set that they use to represent this in the movie is kind of similar to the TV version, leaving bright white walls to be illuminated with kind of dark yellow hues to portray like the gold in the name Heart of Gold. Although the movie takes on it kind of in-your-face bright white. It's very harsh on the eyes, but it kind of gives me like the Apple feel. It's like it's all white and clean, the initial way that Apple went around their Macintosh designs from the beginning, and now kind of skewed from that, but you get the point. The main difference is that the outer design of the ship, instead of kind of being this long and flat ship, is now in the 2005 movie a massive round spaceship, which I think is a really cool design because it's something that you've never seen before. It's not, the Star Wars ship with all these pointy angles and sleek, kind of panels that are slapped onto the side of these things. It's just like a giant orb that flies around all crazy. It's really interesting. The interior, however, is exactly how I imagined it. It's clean and chic, as I mentioned, with kind of wide open rooms and the futuristic vibe all kind of throughout the entire set. I can only imagine how awesome it was to just sit on that set for a little while. Whether it was done in a studio or built completely, I don't know, but it would probably be really cool to sit and just look around for a minute. The same thing could be said for any of the other locations they go in the movie, as the group kind of travels to different planets and locations within the galaxy. So they have these very distinct differences between them all. And to me, the feeling that there was a bit of an effort put in, some thought and some care placed on how differently each location would be, because it's very different environments. Mars isn't going to have the same exact, not that they go there, but Mars, if it was colonized, wouldn't have the exact same kind of building sculptures and stuff that Earth would. So it was nice to see total foreign alien planets having these very distinct and interesting characters and buildings and everything slapped together. To explain how the rest of the story unfolds, we need to jump back to Zaphod, as I mentioned, and his backstory. Zaphod is one of the craziest characters to me in this book. Not because he has 2 heads and 3 arms, but because you'll find out that he has some kind of political gain to himself or an agenda to himself throughout the movie. And believe me, there are weirder looking characters as far as appearance go in this movie, but Zaphod is just the weirdest one of them all. So he's actually the president of the galaxy, and in this story, it's a role that involves no power whatsoever, and it's pretty much only required that it attracts as much attention from the public as it possibly can, so that no one really knows who's in charge. So that way, there's obviously an underlying political story, as I mentioned, that like other people are making the decisions to do things like destroy the Earth for an expressway, and Zaphod is just kind of the face of who needs to be pointed, at for some kind of blame on any kind of decision that was made. And this role fits Zaphod perfectly because he's an idiot and, quite frankly, a narcissist. So it just kind of hit the nail on the head. Not to mention that Sam Rockwell's performance is amazing for how dumb this character is and how well he's able to kind of portray that. But with the fact that he is the president, he decides that he's going to take himself hostage, steal the Heart of Gold, pick up Trisha from a party where I forgot to mention earlier she was with Arthur, or not together, but they were flirting, and then goes on a quest himself to find the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. And I think that, they propose the fact that they're finding the question, but they're really looking for the answer. So a supercomputer by the name of Deep Thought gives the answer to that question as 42. So if you ever hear someone reference, like, what's the answer to some kind of wild and crazy question, and they say 42, which I've heard a few times in the world now and witnessed on the internet, that's a Hitchhiker's Guide reference. So 42 being the answer to life, the universe, and everything is in and of itself just as confusing to the viewers as it is to the people, or mice, I should say, that initially asked it. And yes, I said mice. And I will say it again, it's a long story. You should just watch the movie, but I'll explain in just another second. Zaphod pretty much believes that the true answer to the question lies on a planet called Magrathea. And that planet is actually only accessible using the Heart of Gold's Improbability drive, which is the time and space manipulator, the hyperdrive, if you will, device that got them picked up initially, and them meaning Arthur and Ford. But it's so crazy. So to sum up the Improbability drive, here is a small clip from the movie itself.
The infinite improbability drive is a wonderful new method of crossing interstellar distances in a few seconds, without all that tedious mucking about in hyperspace. As the improbability drive reaches infinite improbability, it passes through every conceivable point in every conceivable universe almost simultaneously. In other words, you're never sure where you'll end up or even what species you'll be when you get there. It's therefore important to dress accordingly. The infinite improbability drive was invented following research into finite improbability, which was often used to break the ice at parties by making all the molecules in the hostess's undergarments leap simultaneously 1 foot to the left in accordance with the theory of indeterminacy. Many respectable physicists said they weren't going to stand for that sort of thing, partly because it was a debasement of science, but mostly because they didn't get invited to those sort of parties.
Once they get to Magrathea, however, the planet basically has a defense system that shoots up a couple of missiles at them. They use the improbability drive to save themselves, even though they shouldn't be using it inside of an atmosphere and only using it in space. But it works out for them, of course, and turns one of the missiles into a whale, the same whale that I talked about earlier with the Jim Henson's creature shop that they designed, as well as a bowl of petunias. And kind of like, I don't know how to explain that. There's like a little scene that kind of explains a bunch of thoughts that are going through the whale's head, as well as the thoughts that is going through the bowl of petunia's head, which is just absolutely ridiculous and hilarious to me. But they end up landing on the planet safely. And this, unfortunately, but it is the way that it is where the movie really starts to kind of like start to wrap things up very quickly. So let's try to do that all in one little take here, and I'll break it down. Arthur meets Slarty Bartfast, who is a man that works on the planet that they landed on, who then takes Arthur to a pocket dimension inside of that planet, where he shows them a new version of the Earth that is being built. And it's almost near completion. Slarty Bartfast then takes Arthur to his recreated home, where inside all of the others that I'm assuming were kind of kidnapped are feasting on a bunch of food that was provided by pan-dimensional beings, being the mice that I mentioned earlier, who initially commissioned the original Earth to be built. Now, with Arthur being the last human, besides Trin, but she wasn't on the Earth as long as Arthur, the mice think that they can discover the question/answer to everything by removing his brain. They strap him down to a chair, start to drill into his brain. Arthur panics, manages to escape, and crush the mice with a deadly teapot that was nearby, and they just magically fade away. After all of that, the Vogons show up somehow on Magrathea, even though you can only access the planet through the improbability drive, and start shooting at anything that moves. Now, Marvin, who is the depressed robot that I kind of mentioned, and he's just kind of a tag-along character throughout the entire movie, but of course becomes one of my favorites, uses a gun by the name of the point of view gun that they have acquired in the earlier portions of the movie to basically make all of the Vogons feel super depressed and they're so depressed that they cannot continue fighting. The Vogons are somehow taken away by something, while Zaphod reunites with one of the other political ladies whose name kind of escapes me right now, and they decide to explore the galaxy further after it's all said and done with Ford and Trillian, and of course allowing Slarty Bartfast to finalize the new Earth without Arthur on it. So a small piece that is missing from the puzzle, but it still continues. The Heart of Gold flies off into the end of the movie, and then they slam on the brakes, turn around, and decide to visit the restaurant at the end of the universe, which is the second book in the Hitchhiker series. And I don't think we'll ever see a movie that's a sequel to this one with the same cast, because it didn't do too well. I don't have numbers. In fact, I don't care to have numbers. The things that are in this movie that just touched me so much was the wacky and zany designs of everything, from the story to the sets to the characters. It wasn't well received as far as viewership goes, but it did decent as far as critics go. But no one listens to the critics, let's be real. I would suggest anyone sit down for a few hours. I think it's only an hour and a half, hour 45 maybe, and watch this movie. It's so fast that I don't even care the runtime, because by the time it's over, I always want so much more of it. There's creature designs that I didn't even mention in here of different beings. There's a creature that will slap you in the face on a certain planet just for thinking. So you have to keep your mind completely open, or this thing comes out of the ground and slaps you in the face. When they're in a scene that they have to get proper paperwork to try to figure out who destroyed the Earth, there's a bunch of cool characters just kind of in the background, giving you kind of a Star Wars vibe, but not as serious, because there's just so much silliness going on. The entire movie has a direct narration from the guide itself that explains things that you don't necessarily understand because it's a sci-fi movie and it's in space. The babblefish, for an example, is a tiny little fish that you shove into your ear, and it feeds on brainwaves, which allows you to understand any language ever spoken to you. I don't know how it works vice versa, if the things that you're talking to understands you. That's not even addressed, but it doesn't matter, because this movie is ridiculous. It's so fun, it's so quippy, and It's one of those movies that I ended up watching right after it came out on a DVD release, which I'm assuming was probably still in 2005, 2006. Loved it. And then while camping with some family members around the same age, I discovered that on a bookshelf, they had the original copy of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and my godfather actually gave it to me and said, "It's all you." And that changed the entire outlook for me, because after seeing this movie and then reading the book, it explained things more. And I was digging through Letterboxd and found a couple of reviews by people that I actually follow, which was nice. And Jason Alley, who's a guy I've been following for a little while on Letterboxd, kind of said this in a nutshell. It was an interesting watch, because I just recently read the first book in the series and was wondering if it might make some more sense to me now. And it did. And it's really awesome for the first hour or so. But this kind of aggressively whimsical filmmaking can't help but be tedious after a while. And it definitely does. And that's exactly what I was saying, is that last portion, the last quarter of the movie, it really starts to chug through. So realistically, I rethought about my scoring. I'm actually not going to change my scoring on Letterboxd, because this movie holds such a really tight grip on my heart. But if I knew all of the things I knew about it now in 2005, I don't think my score would be altered either. But being that I've watched so many movies that we've posted on this channel alone, as well as movies outside of the channel, I think that my take and my look on it has changed just slightly. So on Pick It and Flick It, we decided to make two kind of rating systems, one being a 1 out of 10, one the worst, 10 the best, and as we throw in just the extra little quip on, should you pick it or should you flick it? Pick it being, we suggest it, you should watch it, we want you to watch it, and flick it being it's not worth your time. This is an obvious pick for me if you haven't figured that out as I've been gushing for an extended period of time about it. But my score, initially a 10, I'm going to knock down to an 8, just because that last portion, very, very confusing for a lot of people, clearly. After reading, again, like I mentioned, a couple of Letterboxd reviews, it reflects on it, that it just gets a little sloppy at the end. And I think that's the same way with a lot of sci-fi movies, unless you're Dune and you just leave a huge cliffhanger for us to wait on for 2 years if you don't read the books, then, it's kind of like that, and that's arguably the same thing. The ending still kind of falls flat. So there you have it. Thanks for listening to One Shots. I don't know if there's going to be a whole bunch of these. I'm hoping that Luke does one. I'm hoping that Tasha does one. I might just continue doing them. I don't know. But if you've made it this far and you enjoyed hearing me ramble, give us a like, give us a comment, give us a subscribe, share with your friends. We're just trying to grow. That's all. We're not trying to be famous. We just like to have a little bit of an audience to spew our ridiculous concepts of movie comprehension at, and maybe take some suggestions if you give them, and have a nice little conversation about movies we love and hate. Thanks so much again. We'll see you next time.